We're going to open up to questions and answers. So I invite any questions. And then ask you, please, could you use the microphone when answering the questions?
Hi.
Just use the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Drake Davis. I'm a Liberal Democrat councillor here in Hull. Sit on the Infrastructure and Energy Committee and also part of a upcoming cycling task and finish panel. So, questions for you, Russell. I'd like to get to talk to you more about this. But we think Hull's got great potential to be a cycling city. It has it's number 4 in TomTom's most congestion index in the UK. It's a really congested city. But so what we'd like to do is make it England's or Britain's leading cycling city. So great ambitions, but what is the main thing that's holding it back? Is it funding? Is it the way we design our roads, or is it things like planning, where we're just still following this model of urban sprawl?
I think you've given most of the answers there. I think I would say that the main issue is political willingness. So sometimes it takes a lot of guts actually for political leaders to say, we're going to reallocate some road space, we're going to take some space away from vehicles and give it to people, and we're going to give it to people on foot as a priority, we're going to give it to people on bikes as secondary, and then there's a bit of a hierarchy there. That is potentially unpopular with a small group of people. But actually what our bike life research shows us, which is a longitudinal study and survey, that's the largest survey about attitudes towards cycling, shows that around 77% of people generally, we've done it in various different cities around the UK, 77% of people would support taking space away from vehicle traffic to create more space for cycling in that case. So actually the voice of the people is saying, yes, we do want to have more space for cycling and walking, please let's have it. So the political leaders need to listen to that and make it happen with some funding. And we're working on the funding. Our manifesto is going to government today to ask them for more funding.
Thank you. Who's first?
Hi, Gordon Watts, South Yorkshire Housing Association. First, a quick observation. Sorry, I've forgotten the observation. I'll come back to that in a minute. The question is really, do we need to take politicians out of these decisions? The reason I ask is there's consultation over the summer on the Sheffield Clean Air Zone. And it is looking for a clean air zone that affects buses, taxis, vans only, all private cars excluded. Now, call me a cynic, but I'd be forced to say businesses don't vote when they pay for this stuff. Cars, private cars, do vote. And therefore, politicians will take the path of least resistance and say, oh, well, we will hit buses, taxis, vans, etc. On the basis that they're the most polluting ones. It certainly doesn't look like that at rush hour in Sheffield. It just seems wrong. And it sends the wrong message as much as anything else.
Yeah, we have exactly the same in Leeds and Bradford. And fundamentally, it does come down to political will. And, the easier targets, if you like, are those that are the transport operators and the businesses, and whilst they're keen not to damage attractiveness for business and operation within their cities, the general wider perspective is the private car, and that's a challenge. And when it comes to the modelling, it's easier to model the impact to the vans and the buses, and it's harder to model the exact impact of the car. But yeah, and that it is just as it is. Unfortunately, it's a challenge.
But I think there's a separation between carbon and clean air.
Yeah.
If we're talking carbon, cars are the problem.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a little bit of help? You're actually heard it today because of the elections. A couple of us here are actually covered by it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask very politely, because we keep away from any political questions, because we don't really want. Yes, you can ask questions. Just before anybody gets into trouble, please could we move away from any political questions?
I was just about.
We'll take the gentleman at the back.
Could I turn to speak?
Yeah, of course.
So my observation was we shouldn't forget about agile working and not travelling at all. Using
I'd have been
mobile
happy to love
technology.
to answer it yesterday.
Could I just say a thing on the political aspect of this? Unfortunately, Sheffield Council are not going to influence what BMW is going to produce from their headquarters in Munich. It's EU regulations which are going to influence everything. The challenge we come is the aspirations of UK cities and authorities to accelerate what the car makers, the bus makers are going to do. And when I put my cynical view on there, you can't accelerate what they're going to do because they determine the pace. And at some point, you will not have a choice between a diesel bus and something else because they're only going to make the something else. The challenge is that we've got to realise politically that we cannot change what the vehicle makers are going to make except through EU regulations, and they're going to get fined to death next year, and that's what will change their attitude.
But including cars, could we pull away from buying a 3-ton child tank, big 4x4 Audi or something, or buying a Twingo, for example? And they both exist. You can both buy them, but at the moment there's no disincentive to, other than fuel costs, to buy the 3-ton child tank.
We're also falling into the same trap with electric vehicles, building Porsche Taycans with 90 kilowatt hour batteries, wasting cobalt and lithium that we shouldn't be doing. So we're replicating the errors again.
We'll take the question from the back of the gentleman with the blue.
Shall I just shout or? So my name's Amir, I'm from Jacobs. So my question is kind of twofold, really. The first is, we talk a lot about asset lock-in with power stations, for example. But what about with cars, right? So people buy cars, they'll buy cars for 10, 15 years. And we've already said that, the technology is not quite there. So, people are still buying cars that are going to be on the road for a long time. Not just cars, trains, buses, whatever they might be. But then what are we going to do with recycling and the waste of all these cars that are on the road? There's a lot of more people are buying cars, and eventually we're going to have to change them over, but we're just going to have a large amount that's just kind of, what are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with the end of life of people still buying, conventional cars, really?
We're going to do what we do now, send them to a scrapyard, put them through a crusher, grind them up and recycle it.
I think you've got an interesting thing of locking in infrastructure. Comes a lot with the trains and some of the things, the choices we make now. I'll take railway as an example. We have quite a narrow gauge compared to the German trains. We have smaller tunnels, which locks us into certain designs. We have to be careful with the infrastructure we put in now that we lock in the right things and don't constrain us going forward. But I guess that's something you're looking a lot at.
Yes. With trains, obviously, we have a very good and very long established recycling methodology and contractors who undertake the recycling of redundant rail vehicles. In terms of lock-in, basically, the current generation of diesel multiple units that are being delivered now will be pretty much the last. It's unlikely that anyone would, any of the rolling stock leasing companies would be willing to actually finance buying anymore, given that any conventional diesel unit has to be off the rails by 2040. And the typical life of a train is normally anywhere between 30 and 40 years. So already the trains, the new diesels that are coming in now, unless we can find some way of making them a bi-mode, are going to have a relatively short life. So that decision's already pretty much been made. This is why we are looking at the future now, because 2040 might seem like a very long time away, but the older faces in the room like me will know that it isn't actually any time at all, and very soon we'll be knocking on the door. So we in the rail industry have already very much got a focus on that. The only issue we've got really is with freight, Rail freight's much more efficient in terms of energy use than road freight, but the size of engines and the amount of onboard energy storage you need mean that particularly batteries or hydrogen are very difficult technically at the moment because of the loading gauge and so on. You find in other countries like America and Russia, they are looking at big multi-section locomotives with big tanks of hydrogen on them. It's not really an option for us. So that's still an open challenge, but otherwise we are very focused on the changes that need to be made now to be ready for the then.
Next question. Gentleman on the
Hi, Greg White from North Yorkshire, County Council. We're being encouraged to put in electric vehicle charging points all over the county, particularly at our own sites. From what you're saying today, we're wasting our money. Is that right? Actually, there's no point in doing that, because, or is it still worth doing?
What I'm saying is that what we have to do is match demand with supply. One of the things that we advise local authorities on is initially it was all public money. Now, I started on plugged in places back in 2009. A lot of the infrastructure we put in is obsolete now. Shell, BP, EDF, they're all starting to put infrastructure in. The big challenge you've got and what we're working on is how many charge points should you put in, by what type, and how much should be publicly funded. So we should protect the public purse by only putting in what is necessary. Secondary is to look at what you've actually got in now and analysing the data. So we've analysed it for big areas like Manchester and the North East to find out which ones are actually being used, which ones are not being used, where do we need to reinforce it. But if the council's looking to reinforce it and there's 3 big petrol stations nearby, should you be reinforcing it or should Shell be doing it? So what we're saying is it's not a question of not putting it in, but what we've done in this company up to now is whoever bid for the biggest grant put the most in, which is why there's about 70 rapid chargers in Milton Keynes and 3 in Newcastle. We don't need 70 rapid chargers in Milton Keynes, and there's large parts of the country don't have infrastructure. So that what we do, what we would say to you is, let's go through a diagnostic of what you've got now, what vehicles you're likely to get, what is the profile, and then do a demand-led model. So if you get the chance to read the London one, what we did with them was we worked out a demand-led structure to do it. And please be very wary of the logic of, I live in a terraced house, I need a charge point outside my house. Because if we do that, we'll have to put 8 million on the street. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Also, I don't think certain people would allow
Yeah.
it. I've still got this slide up.
It's what's your priority in terms of how you're using the pavement as well? So these charges going across the pavement, and that's not great for somebody with a double buggy or somebody with slight issues, or anybody who's trying to just walk down the pavement.
Take another question from this. Go on, Mark.
Okay. Sorry. Mark Lewis, Queen's Valley. A question for Julian, really, relating to the availability of significant quantities of crop-based or vegetable oils. And can that meet the demand from the aviation industry? I suppose the long run. That's the question.
Yes, it can. In this country, most waste oils and fats are accounted for. But if you take a country like India, for instance, which has recently announced a blanket ban on the export of used cooking oil for the precise reason that they want to use it to make biodiesel, at the same time guaranteeing offtake prices from their 3 NOCs, Bharat Petroleum, Indian Oil, Hindustan Oil, at starting at 51p a litre for the next 3 years, which gives you confidence for forward investment and so on. In Brazil, we have a 3-ton-a-day pilot project. The offtake is guaranteed by GOL Airlines. That will start with UCO, with used cooking oil. But in the long term, in 5 years, we plan to have replanted, reforested 135,000 hectares of degraded pasture using sustainable palm crop, oil crop called maca uva. And it varies from country to country. So in India, it's all about the UCO, because there are millions, billions of people frying everything they eat. Similarly in Brazil, but also you've got the largest area of legally available agricultural land in Brazil, with vast amounts of it unused. Brazil will be feeding the world. If you look at the World Food Programme demand curve over the next 20 years, Brazil is going to be the bread basket of the world. So it really varies from country to country. But yes, feedstock is available and palm can be produced sustainably. That's important.
Hello, Geraint Evans. I have my own company called Beacon Tech. I'm thinking about different models of filling up electric vehicles, because if I think about a 60 kilowatt hour battery I need to fill it up in an hour, I need 60 kilowatts. And the house is only 12 to 18 or something like that. Can you tell me something about any different models that you're thinking about to fill up electric vehicles beyond on the street, because a 60 kilowatt on a lamppost ain't going to work, I suspect. And it doesn't work so well in a house. Are there different models that we can look forward to seeing for our electric cars for filling up?
The basic question at the moment is that with 90,000 battery electric vehicles in the UK out of 30 million, we can't establish precisely what your behaviour will be. Because almost everybody in here doesn't have an electric vehicle. And the technology which will be around when you start driving it's probably not what it was when I first got mine. So I've had one 6 years, and my behaviour changed between the first one and the second one. I don't know what's going to go forward. We're experimenting a lot between the hubs. So London's going for hubs, petrol stations. And we've built one in Sunderland, there's 3 in Dundee, and Milton Keynes have got them. I don't think it's sustainable. Lampposts are not going to work. London's anti-lamppost because they've got enough clutter on the streets. And interestingly, people come to photograph what's on the streets, which is the old things on the streets they don't want to see charging posts. There's a big discussion going on between how many people will charge at home. Well, that could be 20 million people. And at the current rate of adoption, if it stays like this, it'll be a long time before we exhaust 20 million. It's going to be really unfortunate, and this is going to be the hard thing which politicians and people have got to see. I can charge at home for 15 pence, but some people will have to go to a Shell station and charge at 40 pence. But a lot of people are going to charge at work. And aggregators are hoping lots of people are going to charge at work, because then they'll add up all the batteries and sell the battery capacity to the grid. So one of the things we've got is the algorithms and Ofgem have got to come to terms with all the possibilities. And last night I said, just briefly, I could charge up at home, at work, drive home, plug into my neighbour's house, sell him my electricity, while I'm charging my second-hand battery off my solar panels to charge my car tomorrow when it's expensive. When 30 million people are doing this, there's going to be some very interesting models.
Thank you. One last very quick question. It's very quick.
It is really quick. Question for Julie. Can you make well, presumably you can. I've never heard of aviation fuel being made out of used cooking oil before.
So you're simply hydroprocessing biodiesel into, that's the way we do it.
Yeah.
We're hydroprocessing the biodiesel into three fractions actually. Bio-naphtha, which is a petroleum substitute, HVO and SAF.
Okay. You live and learn.
Thank you. Thank all of the speakers. We have come to the end of the session. I'll tell you that the next session is going on in the main hall, International Trade Zone, which will be interesting under Purda. French Room 2. I used to work at so I've been through this a few times. For local authorities, practical advice for local authorities, climate change emergency, an energy skills workshop, which again is very interesting. I'd like to thank all speakers today and for your time. I'd say we have actually finished on time. So thank you.